Hi, I'm Jamie Bodwin and this is my video assignment. My video assignment is on three characters who are Sam Patch, Tim Crane, and Miss Sarah Cummings. Sam Patch is from Paterson and Tim Crane is from the Manchester side of the Falls. Mrs. Sarah Cummings is from Portland in the District of Maine. So that's where these three characters came from. The themes that take place between the three character stories are slavery, because they all three feel like they're in some kind of bondage. Death, because Miss Sarah Cummings hurts herself, and then Sam Patch hurts himself, and Tim Crane doesn't seem like he's completely okay. And also a theme would be jumping off of cliffs, because Sarah Cummings jumps off a cliff and then Sam Patch jumps off a cliff. So that's a theme. And then there's a theme of the 100 steps that appears in two stories with Sarah Cummings. It appears that's the steps that they climbed to that romantic spot, and it appeared in Tim Crane's story as Jacob's Ladder. So the character Sam Patch jumped off a cliff to save a bridge that was falling. He saved a wooden pin in the water from being lost. This made him into the famous jumper, which led him into killing himself, which one day he jumped sideways and died as an ice cake in the water. The story made it seem like he wanted to kill himself when the crowd wanted him to make a speech because he was famous. Then he jumped and died from it right after. He was in a competition with Tim Crane with his bridge. It is why he jumps so often. So Sam Patch made like a split-second decision to save this bridge, and then he had so much praise from it that it made him famous, so that he kept continuously jumping, and he liked the competition of being like this awesome jumper, because everybody else was working so hard. Like Tim Crane was working so hard, and Tim Crane wanted to be like the best tavern owner, and so Sam Patch wanted to be the best jumper. So he kept jumping until one day he didn't really like being famous so much, and that day he jumped sideways, and that's not safe. You're supposed to jump into water like head first, like a pencil almost. When he jumps sideways, you most likely will die from that kind of jump. So I think Sam Patch did it on purpose to kill himself. I don't think it was an accident. And then Tim Crane always had circus men in his home, and he ran a tavern, and he was in competition with Fifield to have the best tavern, and he built the bridge in the first place to be like the better worker. The poem says that Tim Crane was a really happy man, but he had the mannerisms of Sam Patch. And that makes me think, since he has the mannerisms of an unhappy guy that's named Sam Patch, it makes me think Tim Crane wasn't actually a happy guy. Even though it was said that he was a happy guy, it makes me think that he's not a happy guy, because Sam Patch was not a happy guy. The poem even said that he went through crazy deliriums and bouts of insanity, that I just don't think Tim Crane actually was a happy guy if he had the mannerisms of a guy who was really unhappy. And then Mrs. Sarah Cummings was a woman that got married off to a man that I don't think she wanted to be married off to, and this man was a reverend, and he brought her up to this like romantic spot on a cliff, and it was right next to the 100 steps. That's also called Jacob's Ladder in the Tim Crane story. And the ladder, the steps, and that are also called the Jacob's ladder, reappears. So that's a theme in the story because it reappears twice, and it makes the reader feel like they're all in this little town, and they all keep finding the same places and doing the same things almost. So she goes up to this spot with the Reverend, and it's like she's not happy, and then he turns around and then she just disappears. And it doesn't really tell you in the poem specifically if she did jump off a cliff, but they did find parts of her body and the river below. So it makes me think that she most definitely did jump like Sam Patch and killed herself because she didn't want to be married. She probably felt like she was in some kind of bondage. So that's why I talked about the theme of slavery and feeling like these characters feel like they're in some kind of bondage. Like Sam was in bondage at being the best jumper and then being famous and then not liking it and then wanting to kill himself. And then Tim was a slave at trying to be the best worker, and I don't think he really liked having all these circus people in his house all the time. And then he was imitating Sam Patch, so he probably was in some kind of bondage with that too, because what if he didn't want to be like Sam Patch, you know? And then Sarah was in bondage because she didn't want to be married to the Reverend, and she just did away with it and jumped off a cliff. The poem as a whole, the poem's name is Paterson, and the poem as a whole is supposed to be of a man named Paterson who is represented as a city. It makes me think that the man has the overall feelings of wanting to die. And this is represented, his emotional standpoint as a man with emotions is represented in this poem as many depressing, sad stories where the characters like want to kill themselves. And that's the themes in this poem, in these three stories in the poem. So that's my video assignment.